Today, we're going to replay right now our 2005 interview with the late, great Gene Wilder.
Before we proceed,
I have one question, Dr. Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
I beg your pardon?
My name, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
But aren't you the grandson of the famous Dr. Victor Frankenstein, who went into graveyards, dug up freshly buried corpses, and transformed dead components into...
Yes! We all know what he did. But I'd rather be remembered for my own small contributions to science, and not because of my accidental relationship to a famous cuckoo.
Just some of Gene Wilder's work. Of course, that's from Young Frankenstein, but you also heard Gene Wilder and saw him in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Stir Crazy, Blazing Saddles, The Producers, and many more. And it's our pleasure here at KMOX to welcome actor Gene Wilder, who is now author Gene Wilder of Kiss Me Like a Stranger, My Search for Love and Art. Gene Wilder, welcome to KMOX in St. Louis.
Thank you, Charlie.
It's good to have you. It's personally, I think I speak for many people, but I know personally, I'm a real fan of yours, and so getting you on KMOX is a real treat.
Thanks a lot.
Have you ever been to St. Louis before?
Once when I was 2.5 years old. I don't remember much except the hotel where the chambermaid was fluffing the pillow, and my mother says that I said, "Smy pillow. My pillow," because I thought she was taking my pillow away from me. That's all I remember of St. Louis.
That actually happened in St. Louis when you were 2.5?
Yeah, it did.
Huh. Well,
my father must have had business there, I guess.
You were from Wisconsin, though, right?
Yes, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yes, and it's funny because I wanted to play. Speaking of, you say the little boy says, "Smy pillow." My boy has this little doll called Blue Blue, which is kind of like a blue blanket, but he holds it dearly. And I, last night, played for him. He's 5 years old now. I played for him the scene you have with Zero Mostel in The Producers. He's Max Bialystock, you're Leo Bloom, you're his accountant, he's getting outraged. You pull out your little security blue blanket. And I showed it to Charlie D, and he laughed, and we showed it again. And so it kind of, when you mentioned the pillow, it kind of reminds me of the scene from Producers, which you also write about in your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell us about that scene.
Well, I didn't know how I was going to play that, but I loved the writing, and Zero grabs my little security blanket from me, and the day before I said, "Let me see, what shall I do for this?" And I had a little dog named Julie, and I used to throw a little rubber ball in Central Park in the winter when all the ponds are empty. And I threw it and and the third time I threw it, it went into one of those ponds, and Julie jumped into the pond, and I didn't see her for a long while, and I ran up, and there she was, limping, and a little blood coming out of her nose and her mouth. And I picked her up, and I kissed her, and I took her to the vet. And when I was doing the scene with Zero, I imagined that I was holding my little dog, Julie, and he had just taken her away from me. And I tried to smell the fur and feel the fur. It's called a sense memory in acting. And it made it come to life because he was taking my little poor bleeding Julie away from me.
We can't, of course, see that scene right now, but we can hear it. Let's go to it on KMOX.
Mr. Bialystock, I cannot function under these conditions. You're making me extremely nervous.
What is that, a handkerchief?
Nothing, that's nothing.
If it's nothing, why can't I see?
My blanket, my blue blanket, give me my blue blanket. I'm sorry. I don't like people touching my blue blanket. It's not important. It's a minor compulsion. I can deal with it if I want to. It's just that I've had it ever since I was a baby, and I find it very comforting.
From, of course, The Producers, and you write how your method of acting came from mostly Lee Strasberg, but before that, Uta Hagen, right?
Yes, Uta Hagen, Herbert Berghoff, the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, but mostly the Actors Studio with Lee Strasberg.
And that was essentially where you think of a moment in your life to to draw some emotion?
Well, you're on the right track. It's not so much thinking, it's trying to recall what it felt like by smell, by touch, by hearing, all five senses, and then you recreate an emotion that you had a while before.
And you do this in comedic acting as well as dramatic acting?
Absolutely, yeah. When I was just starting out, I didn't do that. But I thought something was missing. And the thing that was missing for me was how to use my own emotions in the character I was playing. And when I got to the Actors Studio, I learned how to do it.
You write that the happiest you were making a movie was Young Frankenstein.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Well, Madeline Kahn, Marty Feldman, Peter Boyle, Cary Garr, Cloris Leachman, Kenny Mars, and Mel Brooks directing was a little bit of heaven each day that I went to the set. I loved the acting of it. We laughed a lot. And it was the best comedy cast that I can remember for years and years.
I was really surprised. You wrote that there was no improvisation or virtually none with the dialogue in Young Frankenstein, but when you made the movie, Everything You Want to Know About Sex with Woody Allen, the director Woody Allen said, do what you want, say what you want.
He said, it's true, there was no improvisation on Young Frankenstein. Physical, but no word changes. The extraordinary thing about Woody's film was he said, by the way, if you don't like any of these lines, change them to what you feel more comfortable with. Because what he was concerned with was my falling in love with a sheep, the event, not what words I used to express it. And I thought it was very brave, and then I understood what he was getting at. He hired me because he knew I would play it straight, not gimmick it up. And I tried to fall in love with a sheep.
When it was cold outside, we got Willy Wonka on cable this past December, and the kids just loved your work in this, the whole movie. And of course, the beginning of this movie is a famous scene where Willy Wonka makes a somersault after limping with a cane, and that was a scene that you created, correct?
Yes, I liked the script. The director came to my house, said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I like it very much, except there's something missing. And I think at the beginning I should come out with a cane, and there's a huge crowd out there, and then you hear whispering, 'Oh my God, Willy Wonka is crippled. I didn't know that.'" And I walk slowly towards the crowd, and then they hush down. You could hear a pin drop, and then my cane gets stuck in a brick. And when I realize I don't have my cane, I fall forward and then do a somersault and leap up again, and they all applaud. And the director said, what do you want to do that for? And I said, because from that time on, no one will know whether I'm lying or telling the truth. And he said, "You mean you won't do the part if you can't do that?" I said, "Yes, that's what I mean." He said, "Okay, it's in."
How often do you do that with a director?
That was the first time. I mean, if I would do it again if the situation arose.
Mm-hmm.
It never arose. But that script was fine, except I thought the audience and the children shouldn't know whether I'm lying or telling the truth. And I just thought of that way to make it happen at the very beginning of the film, to show that, well, what is he doing? Is he lying now? In all the scenes that follow. But in other films, I didn't have that problem.
Gene, I was kind of surprised when you wrote that both the producers and Willy Wonka failed at the box office.
They did. It did. They became cult films later on, but when they first came out, they were commercial failures. And then about 2 years later, they caught on. Strange.
The Producers was recreated as a Broadway hit, and my understanding is that Willy Wonka will come out again this summer. Am I right?
You're half right. It won't be the same Willy Wonka that I did, and the title is going to be Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, which was Roald Dahl's original title for the book. And Tim Burton directing it. Tim Burton, who did Edward Scissorhands and Batman and Beetlejuice, he's not going to write the same kind of... It'll be the same plot, I'm sure, but I don't think the story will be at all similar. And my guess is that it'll be much scarier, with many more visual effects.
Are you going to have any role in that movie?
None whatsoever. I said if they would remake The Wizard of Oz first, and then come to Willy Wonka, maybe I would consider it.
This is Gene Wilder, and he has written his book, Kiss Me Like a Stranger, which I picked up at Barnes & Noble yesterday, so I know it's in the bookstores. It's My Search for Love in Art, and when we come back, we'll talk about his life with Gilda Radner and others, and what a doctor told him at the age of 8, and then we're going to get to your phone calls at 436-7900, 800-925-1120. If you'd like to talk to the man who made you laugh and stir crazy, and Blazing Saddles, the producers, Young Frankenstein, you saw him in Willy Wonka, he was in Bonnie and Clyde, and directed other movies like The Woman in Red, 436, yada, yada, yada. Back in a moment on KMOX. Of course, that's from March of 2005 when the late Gene Wilder was with us on KMOX, and we'll return to that in just a moment, as the gentleman said. Charlie Brennan, the voice of St. Louis. It was announced by his family yesterday that actor Gene Wilder died earlier this month after battling Alzheimer's. Today, we're replaying our March 28th, 2005 interview with the late, great Gene Wilder.
Mrs. Barson?
There is no Mrs. Bargain Barson here.
Candy Grant.
Look, I'm all out of candy. I gave it all away. Now go home.
UNICEF, ma'am.
UNICEF? That's different.
Of course, that's the famous Land Shark episode from Saturday Night Live, a classic in American comedy, starring Chevy Chase as the Land Shark and Gilda Radner, the woman who opened the door there. Our guest is Gene Wilder. Kiss Me Like a Stranger is his memoir, his search for love in art. And, of course, you were married to Gilda Radner for 5 years. She died of ovarian cancer in 1989. It seems to me it must have been rather difficult for you to write about those last years of your lives together.
It was. The writing about the first part, meeting her, falling in love, getting married, that part was not difficult, but getting to when she was suffering so, with stage 4 ovarian cancer, that was a tough part. And a lot of things came up that I had buried, and it was good for me. It was cathartic to write about it, and I felt better when it was done.
I got the impression the two of you were very much in love, but it wasn't an easy relationship.
No, not at all. I didn't get along with her on so many scores, and I loved her. That was a fact that we loved each other, but it was also a fact that we had a lot of troubles because she was so needy. She was so afraid to be alone, to do anything without me. It was like having a little kid hanging onto your arm everywhere you went. And yet, when she wasn't there, I missed her. I wanted my fix. But, and then when she got sick, she, I don't know what to say, she grew up. And then other troubles came because of the suffering she was going through with cancer. But it wasn't an easy time, but I would say that she is the most unique person, I think, the most unique woman I've ever met in my life. I would say Zira Mostel and Mel Brooks are also unique, but she was unique in her own way. That's an oxymoron. She was unique. And I don't think I'll ever meet anyone like her again.
You write about how she did suffer from the eating disorder bulimia, Gene,
Yeah.
and her rule was that you weren't allowed to talk about it. Am I right?
She didn't tell me at first. I said, well, what is the secret? And she said, I'll tell you later on. I'll tell you when I get to know you better. And then when she did tell me, I didn't know what bulimia was. She explained it to me. And then she said, all I ask of you is that you don't try to monitor me. Because she would eat a sparse breakfast and a little lunch, and then she would indulge herself at dinner time, everything, 2-3 orders of things, and then disappear, go to the bathroom where she was vomiting, and then she cleaned her breath and came back and pretty as a picture, but she wanted to stay thin, and she licked it. That's a tough thing to lick. It's like getting rid of a heroin addiction, but she did lick it, and after she did, she got ovarian cancer.
When she did die, she had, in just the previous weeks before that, been engaged in other activities like singing lessons, and the death, even though, of course, as a reader, we know it's going to happen, it almost comes as a surprise.
Yeah.
At least it did to me. In real life, was it surprising?
Well, I was what I would call sublimely stupid. Everyone else seemed to know that she was not going to make it. But I really believed with all my heart that she would lick the ovarian cancer with the chemo and all the other help she was getting. And it wasn't until 3 weeks before she died that I realized that she wasn't going to be able to. I think everyone else around, all of her best friends knew it, but I didn't. And that was good, because when we ever had an argument, which was not very often, when I just couldn't take some things anymore, and I would yell, she would sigh and say, thank you. I know you wouldn't have done that if you thought I was going to die. And then she'd put her arms around me and kiss me, thanking me for getting angry with her.
Earlier in your relationship, I was surprised. You write that, for example, at one point you visited your adopted daughter in the hospital with Gilda Radner, Rosanna Dana, and you say that your adopted daughter was just crazy about her, but you had only seen her on Saturday Night Live 2 or 3 times.
That's right. I knew Gilda, that she was famous for Saturday Night Live, and I think I saw it, well, maybe 3 times, once or twice. But she laughed so when I would say Rosanna Dandridge or make some stupid mistake because I didn't know the shows, and she loved it that I didn't know her shows. Then after we got married, she showed them over and over, and I think I've seen everything she's done on Saturday Night Live.
Reading your book, I come to this thought again and again, how you make all of us laugh through Blazing Saddles, The Producers, Young Frankenstein. Behind the scenes, your life is hardly easy and uncomplicated. From early on with your mom, and then later on with your wives and your adopted daughter. Is that kind of a strange irony, this life that you live? Everyone's laughing on the other side of the screen, but in your own life there's a lot of pain and, in some cases, suffering and difficulty?
Well, the reason that I wrote the book, the foundation I had that gave me the courage to write the book, was because my life is so filled with ironies. As I think all of us have these ironies, these accidents that happen, and then you say, it caused an enormous change in my life. But if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met her, I wouldn't have got this job, I wouldn't be living in this town, in this house, I wouldn't have been married to her, all because of accidents. And that's when I realized I had the structure for the book. And I had a lot of accidents. And I mean, when I was 8 years old and my mother came home from the hospital after a severe heart attack, the doctor who brought her home grabbed me by the arm, not mean, he was a big man, and he said, don't ever argue with your mother because you might kill her. That certainly changed my life a lot. But the second thing he said was, try to make her laugh. And that was the first time I tried consciously to make someone else laugh.
And you made her laugh a lot, didn't you?
I made her laugh a lot, so much so that when she had to pee, from my telling some silly thing, and she said, "Oh, Jerry," that was my name then. "Oh, Jerry, now look what you've made me do," and she'd run to the bathroom. But, such things give a young boy courage that you can make other people laugh.
Speaking of pee, who said that you wore a pea coat somewhere?
Oh, no. That was when Anne Bancroft, in the play I was doing, Mother Courage, on Broadway, starring Anne Bancroft, her boyfriend was Mel Brooks, and she wanted me to meet Mel. And I went backstage I went to her dressing room because I was in the play with her, and she introduced me to Mel, and he was short and a big nose, but he had this gorgeous black, what they called a merchant marine, a pea jacket. And I said, "My, you look very handsome in that jacket." He said, "Yeah, they used to call them urine jackets, but they didn't sell."
We're going to get to phone calls in just a moment. So hang on, everybody. This is Gene Wilder. He's written the book, Kiss Me Like a Stranger. And that's from 2005, when Mr. Wilder joined us on The Voice of St. Louis. As you know, his family announced yesterday he passed away earlier in this month. Our final segment with this interview, and Gene Wilder in just a moment on The Voice of St. Louis. Charlie Brennan on The Voice of St. Louis. Well, it's great to hear, but kind of sad to hear the voice of Gene Wilder today. He died earlier this month, but he did join us March 28th, 2005, and gave us what I think was a great interview. Let's get back to that for our third and final segment this morning on KMOX. In this book, you write you're hoping for a reunification with your adopted daughter, who for some reason doesn't want anything to do with you. Since the book was published, has there been a détente?
No.
Have you heard from her?
No.
Are you hopeful that something like that will happen?
I hope for the best, expect the worst. I don't anticipate that happening. I think she's just too filled with anger, and if she had a little more courage, a little more confidence, I think that she'd say, "Here's why I'm angry with you," or "Don't wish to talk or write. I wrote." She didn't answer. But anyway, it's a story that I don't understand. I have little clues, but I don't really understand it.
As an author, you have kind of a duty to write about these things, but as a family member, did you also have any concern that you'd be spilling some of the privacy of other family members?
No, I didn't. I didn't write anything that I thought would hurt. I think I was very careful about that. I mean, in this one sense, the truth hurts, but I wasn't passing judgments. I just was telling what happened in my life. And I think if you're referring specifically to my daughter, I think I've been told by reviewers and people when I give a lecture that you handled your daughter so lovingly. So maybe she'll call, maybe she'll write. I don't know.
Let's go to Tom, who's now on KMOX with Gene Wilder. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. How are you?
Great.
Hey, Gene, I read your book last week. I loved it.
Thank you.
I actually read it in one day. Couldn't put it down. Thought it was a great book. And I've loved your movies.
Thank you.
Do you ever see Richard Pryor or keep in touch with him at all?
Well, Richard lives in Los Angeles, and I live in Connecticut. And the last time we spoke was several years ago. He called. Well, first he called me when Gilda died. Then he called me when I got married. Then he got very ill, and then his wife called a few times to ask if I would do something on tape for a benefit. And I did 2 or 3 of those, but I haven't heard from him in maybe 3 years now. And I don't think he's doing too. He has multiple sclerosis, and he had a triple bypass. That was right after See No Evil, Hear No Evil. So I don't know how he's doing right now.
Let's go to Jeff, who's next on KMOX with Gene Wilder, the author of Kiss Me Like a Stranger. Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
Hi, Jeff.
I was wondering if you can get Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory in Russian.
Now, why do you want it in Russian, Jeff?
I've been talking to this girl in Russia, and she'd never seen your movie before. And if it was in English, she would have a hard time understanding it.
Here's what Jeff, here's what I do. When they want me to do a movie, and I don't know the director's work, I say, do you have something on VHS or DVD that he's done? And they send me something, and I always watch it without the sound, because I don't want to be influenced by rotten dialogue or good dialogue or bad music or beautiful music. I want to just see the pictures. Does he tell a story with the pictures? And I would say with someone who doesn't speak English at all, who might not understand the words, let her watch it just watching the pictures.
Very interesting. Lisa, you're next with Gene Wilder. Good morning, Lisa.
Hi, Gene. First off, I just wanted to say our family just absolutely we're junkies for Young Frankenstein. We watch it every time it's on. My question is, have you ever thought about doing another sitcom on TV? I know you had done one, about 20 years ago that we really, really enjoyed, and that was my question.
Well, the sitcom that I did 20 years ago was done about 8 years ago. It was called Something Wilder. I was very disappointed in it because they should have called it Almost Nothing Wilder, because the studio executives took control of everything. But I did do Will and Grace, and I got an Emmy for that, and I loved doing it, and I loved all those people, and they asked me to do another one, and I did. And the other one, the second one I did, was just joke, 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 punchline to punchline, to nothing to act. And I was terribly disappointed, and I said, this is not my cup of tea, so I don't want to do any more situation comedies.
Let's go to our next call. Joan. Good morning, Joan. You're on KMOX. John, I'm sorry. Good morning, John.
Oh, that's okay, Charles. No problem. I've been called worse. Listen, Gene, pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks.
I got a little late here, and I don't know if you may have talked about him, but your relationship and what it was like to work with Marty Feldman. I mean, I am just a Young Frankenstein junkie, and I even like the one show that I see on FX all the time. But explain a little bit about Marty.
Well, you didn't miss anything because I didn't talk about Marty yet. But Marty was one of the dearest people. He was like an angel, and he was shy, believe it or not. Except if he had a few drinks and he was in a big crowd and there was a lot of pressure for him to say something, he would blurt out the most outrageous things. I thought, this is coming from little Marty? But working with him each day was like having your best friend around all the time. We hugged. The whole cast was very close, but Marty and I were particularly close, and I only wished that he didn't have that cigarette lighter hanging from a leather strap around his neck, because he smoked about 3 packs a day. And then he got caught in Mexico making a film, and he locked his door, and then he got a heart attack, but the people couldn't get in because the door was locked. But, the altitude was much higher, and I doubt that would have happened if he were on sea level instead of so high up. But anyway, I loved him, and he was an angel.
Well, on my cable set, I'm now able to search for actors' names, and it shows me all the shows that are coming up in the next couple of weeks with them, and I threw yours in there yesterday, Gene Wilder, and, your work lives on, and it's going to live on for a long time. That's got to be very satisfying.
It is. It's wonderful because I watch mostly 30s and 40s movies, not only, but mostly late at night if I turn on Turner Classic Movies and things like that. And there's so many actors, and I'll mention a name, and people don't know who it is because their films are not shown that often. And I walk down the street, and people say, "Hi, I saw you last night. That was great." And I don't know which film they're talking about. But Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Young Frankenstein, especially Willy Wonka, they're shown all the time. So people think that I just finished making them a couple of years ago. It's wonderful. It's like immortality.
Gene Wilder, author of Kiss Me Like a Stranger, My Search for Love and Art. Thank you very much for joining us again on KMOX in St. Louis.
Not at all. You're a very good interviewer, Charlie.
It's very nice of you to say, and I hope you got your pillow here in St. Louis.
Oh, don't worry. I always carry that with me.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Bye.
The late Gene Wilder with us on March 28th, 2005. Wow, what an interview. What an entertainment legend. And
It is so true. His work lives on for all to enjoy for generations to come. We're going to repeat this again Monday night on Profiles on the Voice of St. Louis. So if you missed this, you can catch it again Monday evening, Labor Day, on the Voice of St. Louis, KMOX.